The wind screamed across the dry plains of Arizona Territory like a restless ghost wandering the desert. Dust rolled over the empty land, swallowing the narrow trail that cut through the valley. Most travelers had long since found shelter for the night. But one lone rider continued forward through the darkening storm. Her name was Clara Whitmore, a quiet widow who lived alone in a small cabin near the edge of the canyon. Clara wasn't supposed to be out riding after sunset. But when the storm clouds rolled in earlier that evening, she had gone looking for her runaway mule. Out here, losing an animal meant losing food, supplies, and sometimes survival itself. The desert had a way of punishing mistakes. Her lantern swung softly from the saddle horn, throwing a weak circle of yellow light across the trail. The wind tugged at her coat as she scanned the rocky ground ahead. Then her horse suddenly stopped. Its ears lifted sharply. Clara frowned and leaned forward. "Hush now," she whispered. The horse refused to move. Something was wrong. She raised the lantern higher and looked toward the dark shape lying near the rocks beside the trail. At first she thought it was just a fallen branch. But then it moved. Clara's breath caught in her throat. A man lay face down in the dust. His coat was torn and soaked dark with blood. For a long moment Clara simply stared. In this land, finding a wounded man on the road was rarely a good sign. Bandits, bounty hunters, and outlaws roamed the territory. Helping the wrong man could get you killed. She slowly slid off her horse. The wind howled louder. Carefully, Clara approached the body. When she reached him, the lantern light revealed something that made her heart stop. An arrow was buried deep in the man's back. Not just any arrow. An Apache war arrow. The man groaned weakly. He was still alive. Clara knelt beside him and gently turned him onto his side. His face appeared in the lantern glow. Strong jaw. Dust-covered beard. And pinned to his torn vest, a silver star. Clara's eyes widened. A U.S. Marshal. "Dear God," she whispered. The Marshal tried to speak but only coughed blood. Clara quickly looked around the dark plains. No riders. No torchlight. Nothing but wind. Whoever had attacked him was gone, at least for now. She leaned close. "Can you hear me?" The Marshal's eyes opened slightly. They were pale gray, sharp even through pain. "Water," he rasped. Clara grabbed her canteen and lifted his head carefully. He drank a few weak swallows before collapsing back against the dirt. Then he whispered something that chilled her blood. "They're coming." Clara's heart pounded. "Who?" "Bounty hunters." His breathing grew shallow. "They think I'm dead already." Clara looked again at the arrow in his back. If she left him here, he would die before sunrise. But bringing him home meant something else. If bounty hunters were chasing him, they might come looking. And out here, law didn't always protect the innocent. Still, Clara had buried her husband 3 winters ago after fever took him. She knew what it meant to watch someone die alone. She stood slowly and made her decision. "No," she said softly. "You're not dying here tonight." With great effort she dragged the Marshal toward her horse. The man barely moved, slipping in and out of consciousness as Clara struggled to lift him. It took nearly 20 minutes. Finally she managed to pull him across the saddle. Blood dripped slowly onto the dirt. Clara mounted behind him and turned the horse toward her cabin deep in the canyon. The storm swallowed them as they disappeared into the night. Her cabin stood hidden between tall red rocks where the wind rarely reached. Most travelers never even noticed the narrow trail leading to it. Clara pushed the door open with her shoulder. The fire inside had nearly died. She quickly laid the Marshal on the wooden table. The lantern light revealed just how bad the wound was. The arrow had gone deep. Too deep. Clara swallowed hard. She had helped patch up ranch hands before, but removing an arrow from a man's spine was something else entirely. Still, there was no choice. She heated a knife over the fire. Then she gripped the arrow shaft. "Hold on," she whispered. The marshal groaned faintly. Clara broke the shaft carefully and pulled the arrowhead through the wound. Blood spilled onto the floor. The marshal screamed once before collapsing unconscious. Clara worked quickly, cleaning the wound and wrapping it tightly with cloth. Hours passed. Outside, the storm finally faded. The desert fell silent. Clara sat beside the table watching the wounded lawman breathe. Who was he? Why were bounty hunters chasing a marshal? And most importantly, would they come looking for him here? She must have fallen asleep in the chair. Because the next thing she heard was a faint voice. "Where am I?" Clara opened her eyes. The marshal was awake. "You're safe," she said. "For now." He tried to sit up but pain forced him back down. "You shouldn't have helped me," he said quietly. Clara crossed her arms. "Too late for that." He studied her carefully. Then he said something unexpected. "My name is Marshal Daniel Hayes. And men are hunting me because I arrested the most dangerous outlaw in this territory." Clara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Who?" The marshal looked toward the door. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Jacob Rourke." Clara's face went pale. Everyone in Arizona Territory knew that name. Rourke wasn't just an outlaw. He was a killer. And he had dozens of bounty hunters working for him. The marshal closed his eyes again. "They'll come at dawn." Clara stood slowly. "How many?" Hayes gave a weak smile. "Enough to burn this cabin to the ground." Silence filled the room. The fire cracked softly. Clara looked out the window toward the dark horizon. If they ran now, the marshal would die before morning. If they stayed, the bounty hunters would find them. She turned back toward the wounded lawman. Then she said something that surprised even herself. "Well, Marshal." She reached for the old rifle above the fireplace. "I suppose we better get ready." Hayes stared at her. "You planning to fight them?" Clara loaded the rifle slowly. Her voice was calm. "I've lived in this canyon 10 years. Those men don't know the land." She looked toward the rising line of pale light on the horizon. Dawn was coming. And somewhere out there, horses were already riding toward the canyon.